And this webinar for King's College London and Fourth Rev regarding the UX Design Career Accelerator. Today, we are going to hear from a fantastic panel about transitioning into UX, starting from X into UX, and hear from those who've made the switch as well. My name is Daniel Cairns. I'm the head of enrolments here at Fourth Rev, and it is my great pleasure to welcome you here this afternoon as well from wherever you are in the world. It's brilliant to see so many of you, as I mentioned, but also introducing yourself from all over the world into the chat function that I can see there. Firstly, for those of you that aren't aware, Fourth Rev empower learners for high digital careers. We deliver life-changing learning experiences that combine the best of career-focused education, built with leading technology companies, with the academic rigor and value and certification of the world's best universities, obviously in this case with King's College London, our most valued partner in the program. A very quick piece of housekeeping. There is a function down below where you'll see the Q&A. As we discuss items with the panel and it raises questions that you might like to ask, we certainly have some time reserved at the end to address some of the questions. With such a big audience, I'm not sure that we'll get to all, but we'll certainly do our best. So if you have specific questions of the panel, please pop them in the Q&A and not the chat function. That gives us the opportunity to upvote and to answer those questions live as well. For those of you that are interested in learning more about the program as well after the panel discussion, I will make myself available for longer and answer any specific questions and give a quick overview of the course, the requirements, the entry criteria, application process, and things like that. Today's webinar, though, in our increasingly digital world, the importance of user experience design cannot be overstated. It shapes the way we interact with technology, from the apps we use on our phones to the websites we visit daily. But what's particularly fascinating about UX design is its accessibility. It's an industry that attracts individuals from various backgrounds, even without a tech or design pedigree. And some of our current learners in the program are testament to that. They're from all different backgrounds and walks of life. Today, we're here to learn about this transformative field, guided by our distinguished panel of experts. They have navigated this path themselves, transitioning from diverse careers to become accomplished UX professionals. They are here to share their stories, experiences, and advice with you. And I'm going to introduce them very, very shortly. But before I do, I thought I'd just let you know also that you'll be getting an exclusive bonus resource on how to cultivate a growth mindset sent to your inbox tomorrow, along with a recording of this webinar. And also, if you register before the 17th of October, you'll get access to an exclusive masterclass with a career coach on how to use that growth mindset to successfully switch careers. You can download a brochure from the chat function now, or you can also book a time with one of the friendly enrolment advisors that are there to assist you and have a great deal of empathy for those that are also considering UX as a career and possibly as a career change as well. Without further ado, after that long intro, apologies, it gives me great pleasure to welcome Maiyo, Phoebe, Anna Phantom, and Simon Watley to our webinar today. Welcome, guys.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Daniel.
My absolute pleasure. I do appreciate so much of all of your time, and would like to start by asking you to introduce yourselves. Maiyo, I might start with your good self as well, a little bit of background about what it is that you do and for the audience.
All right. Well, hello, everyone. I see we've got people tuned in from South Africa, from Germany, people from Kenya as well. Really, really exciting. So Sawubona, hello, Karibu, welcome, everyone. So to share a little bit about myself, I always love to say that I went through my father's checklist of what a career should look like. It's about getting the house, getting the car, getting married, having the babies. And then at some point, I realized something is missing here. There must be more to this thing called life. And I embarked on a journey of self-discovery. And I realized that whatever space I'm in, the ultimate encourager. And it got me into a space of exploring executive coaching, culture strategy, as well as professional facilitating and speaking. And fast forward to today, I'm really excited to have the opportunity to work with incredible organizations, individuals, and teams, and empowering them to become more of who they want to be.
Fantastic. And your work is very much appreciated, I know, from many people's perspective in the lives that you touch through your coaching as well. Anna, welcome, and thank you once again for your time. We'd love to hear about your background as well.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'll do a little intro. I'm Anna. I'm a user experience designer. I currently work for Cancer Research UK, but I have previously worked in more corporate environments, such as ASOS, Westfield, a lot of freelance work and various other things. Had a very squiggly path to get here, as we like to call it in this industry, which I am happy to share a lot more about later.
Very much looking forward to that, and thank you. It's great to have you with us today. Simon, thank you as well for your time and welcome. The audience and myself certainly would love to know a little bit about your background, and then we'll get into some questions as well.
Hello, yes, so I'm Simon Watley. I'm currently a freelance service designer working at the Department for Education in the UK. I've been there quite a long time now, but prior to that I was working at other government departments, for example Ministry of Justice and Government Digital Service that people may have heard of, and prior to that mostly in the private sector, so working for agencies and startups.
Fantastic. I guess the first component of the webinar today will explore the key skills and knowledge needed for a successful transition into UX. Particularly Anna and Simon. Anna, you started your career as a writer and editor, and Simon, you started in web development. Can you please share your career journey into UX and the key skills or knowledge gaps you had to address when transitioning into UX design? Anna, first.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, I started as a kind of writer and editor, mainly because I did the thing that a lot of people do when they leave university, leave school. They have no idea what they want to do. They don't know what careers are out there. I liked writing, but I also liked a lot of other things. But I thought I'll do a little course in journalism and go from there. It was a great start to my kind of working life. I immediately kind of went into the digital forum, worked for online websites, online magazines, ended up being sort of an editor. And while I was there, I just kept thinking things were very separate in that day and age, where we had things designed for the web and then we'd write on it, and there was just some kind of disconnect. I think I was there at this kind of time where we were still learning how to design for the web. So I was kind of learning on the job and realizing I didn't think I was a designer. I never thought I was a designer. I loved drawing and art, but I didn't think that was a career path for me because I didn't really realize what a designer was. But I ended up redesigning everything I worked on, or at least working with the designers to redesign it for the people who were using it. I sort of went from that into kind of content strategy, content marketing, worked within Westfield as a digital content manager, which was, again, a wonderful, wonderful job with wonderful people. And it was there that I started learning that UX actually was a thing that existed, and was a thing that was the thing I wanted to do. I just didn't realize it existed. So that was where I really started learning. I started doing bits of it on the job, because you just did in that day. We didn't have user experience designers when I was working there, but I had to do a course to sort of transition and fill in some of those gaps in my knowledge.
That's fantastic, and that's, I guess, what a lot of the audience potentially either looking to commence their careers, change careers, or advance their existing careers, possibly looking at following it as well. Simon, yourself as well in that regard.
Yeah, so I had perhaps a similar path to Anna, in so much as I did human geography at university, which obviously, being human geography, there's a very kind of human element to it, and researching and what people are doing in their lives. But I left university and really didn't know what I was going to do. And typically geographers either end up being a teacher or they end up being an accountant. And I obviously followed this stereotype, and I joined an American company in their accounts department, and I was like, oh, should I do accounts? And obviously that revelation kind of shocked me a little bit, and they didn't actually want to train me as an accountant, which was a bit of a bummer at the time. But at the same time, I met a friend of mine who worked for a startup, and they were like, do you want to come and work as a web developer? And I was like, well, I don't really know anything about web development. And they said, oh, that's fine, we'll train you. And back 20 years ago, that was kind of fine. People just, it didn't matter whether you had the skill or not. You just joined the company and they trained you. So during my time there, I was building stuff for users and just going out and talking to people and just finding out how our website was working for them. And I knew absolutely nothing about UX design. I didn't even know the term. I didn't know anything about it. So I just kind of carried on talking to people, building stuff, talking to people, building stuff. And then that company went bust, and then I kind of joined another company and carried on doing the same thing. And my interest in UX grew. I still didn't know what UX was, and sort of just carried on kind of muddling through, not really understanding. And then at one point I joined a design and development agency. And at this point in time, I was still a web developer. I wasn't doing anything UX related, but they had a small group of UX designers there. And I suddenly thought, oh, what's this profession? And I started talking to them, and I basically spent most of my day talking to them and finding out what they were doing rather than actually doing the web development work, which was quite surprising, really, that they didn't fire me, but I was still there and it still carried on going. And then I found out about, or they encouraged me to kind of really develop this kind of UX skill. And a couple of them had attended a course at UCL. So apologies for the King's folks here, but they encouraged me to go and join a course at UCL, which was in human-computer interaction. And at this point in time, I was like, oh, okay, so this is a thing. There's lots of stuff around it. And I started getting a really fundamental kind of foundation in human-computer interaction, the UX world, user research, and I started really understanding what was happening. But somewhat unfortunately, that agency went bust. But then the next day I was like, okay, I'm going to stop web development. I know this UX world, and I basically labeled myself as a UX designer. And from that point on, I worked really hard to try and understand what UX was about, understand like the tools and techniques behind it and who the people were in the world, and just carried on kind of from the UX side of things. So it was almost like there was a tectonic shift that happened. I spent 10 years as a web developer, and then suddenly it all ended. And I was like, okay, I'm going to move. I'm going to become a user experience designer.
Best decision you made?
Definitely, yeah. Because like 15 years later, I'm still doing stuff in this UX world. I might be labeled as a service designer, but it's still talking to users. So yeah.
Fantastic. Maiyo, as a career coach, you've worked with a lot of career switches or changes. What are some of the main concerns going into a new field, and what advice would you give people considering that?
Well, one of the main ones is that people are so concerned about not having enough experience and enough skills. So let's say you've been working as an interior designer for like 10 years, and now suddenly you want to go into UX. So the first thing that racks people's mind is that, how on earth am I going to get a job? Like, who would want to hire me? I've only known interior designing all of my life. And one thing that I always say to learners is that you should focus on your transferable skills. So it's not so much the different jobs that you've done, but it's about really challenging yourself to look at the golden thread that runs through everything. And with another concern, that people have when they change jobs is how they're gonna make the switch in positioning themselves, because all your life you've been posting about interior design, and now suddenly you want to go into UX. And that really speaks to crafting a personal brand story where you seamlessly merge all of your experience together. And that's something that we really help learners with on the career coaching program that we offer as part of the course. And I'll go into that a little bit more later. But bottom line, the main concern is, who will want to hire me after doing one thing for so long?
So true, and so inspiring too. And it gives us amazing satisfaction to see people transition through learning new skills and coming from such a varied background. Anna and Simon, as people who've now worked, as you guys have now worked in UX for quite some time, what skills and experience do you look for in a great UXer? Are they coming from a particular background like psychology or graphic design, or does it not matter for that?
I really struggle to find one particular thing, and I think I can see when I meet people. So I find in exactly what you were saying there, like I find I can use writing as a skill that builds on top of UX and is complementary. But I have found that people who come from a psychology background bring something wonderful, and they have a great background. I've had excellent engineers work with me, people who come from really varied backgrounds as well. There are so many skills, and I honestly, I was thinking about this, and there isn't one sort of common thing. People who come from a graphic design background versus people who come from a psychology background versus people who come from a marketing background or journalism or writing or tech. I think the only thing I'd say is maybe an advantage is if you've worked in the digital world before and you're working in digital. I think knowing that realm, knowing a little bit about the tech, or knowing, knowing psychology as well is a massive benefit. But even if it's a massive career change, I mean, architects, I've known architects who go into UX and they're fantastic as well, because it's the kind of job, I think, that allows you to do that. And if you are, if you've got these kind of threads of collaboration, there's so many soft skills that I think are more important than the hard skills, I guess, and they can all be learned. And I think the other thing that's a really key point to say is that the teams I've worked in, there's usually not just one skill set. Everyone is not the same in that team. You will likely have a team which is a mix of people who are more on the kind of research side and more on the sort of visual design side, and more people who are thinkers, who are kind of collaborators. And that's what makes a great team, is having that mix of people. So the interviews I've been to myself, or interviews I've been involved in, they're often looking for someone with a certain way of thinking, and that's not, or they might have a multiple set of roles. And there might be some, yes, where having a visual design background or having a graphic design background is what's necessary in that team, but it's not necessary for the job as a whole. There will be another team that you will be perfect for. So that's, yeah, it's a very fluffy answer, like most of UXs, but it's to say that any career has transferable skills, I think.
Yeah, for me, to be successful, I think it's all about the attitude that you have, rather than the tools that you know or the techniques you know. It's really, if you want to be good at UX, you need to be inquisitive and eager to learn. You're not going to be, we've mentioned growth mindset at the beginning of this webinar, but in essence, a UX designer has to have a growth mindset. They have to go out there and they have to find out solutions to their problem, and they have to come with that to work and be happy to do that, and happy to work with sort of complexity and the unknowns to actually be successful. Anyone can learn Figma, anyone can learn qualitative user research, but they can't necessarily learn the attitude as easily. It's something they have to train and work towards.
You both make great points, and I'll wrap that into a question for Maiyo, because we have such a varied audience and a varied bunch of learners undertaking the program, and you've all touched on that transferable skills. So, Maiyo, are there particular transferable skills you can highlight that career changers should focus their attention on when moving into UX potentially?
Definitely, there's specific ones that I can highlight, but having said that, I also don't want people to develop tunnel vision and think, oh my gosh, I don't have those 4 things that Maiyo said I should have. I'm doomed. I'm not going to be able to do this. It really is about finding that golden thread. However, the general ones that I would suggest people focus on, number 1 is empathy. And interestingly enough, I wrote an article earlier this week for my newsletter around empathy. And we tend to think of it as a touchy-feely thing for coaches only, psychologists only. We tend to think of it as a therapeutic type of thing, right? But when you think about empathy on a bigger scale, it's about your ability to be able to connect and to see diverse audiences. And if you worked in a role, for instance, going back to the example that I used about the interior designer, you get to work with a whole bunch of people, understanding what their needs, validating whatever it is that they want to see in whatever it is that you're going to create for them. And then number two is communication skills. So having the ability to convey your ideas clearly and to be able to connect with people, that's so crucial, because UX really is a cross-functional role. You're engaging with different audiences, different people. So in most roles that people have been in, you have been required to have communication skills to do your job. And then the next one is around creativity, because if you think about it, UX really is about creative problem solving. You're given this challenge and you have to come up with something that feels intuitive, something that makes sense to whatever brief you've been given. And the final one that I want to mention is attention to detail. Because in UX, it's the small little things that can completely throw somebody off in whatever design you've made. I don't know how many times I've been on a website and I'm looking for something and I'm going according to the names of the menus at the top. And then when I eventually find the thing, I'm like, but why didn't you put this under that menu? Like, that makes so much more sense. Why did you hide it in there? So to the designer, it might seem like a small little thing, but to the user, if you're not focused on the small little details and putting yourself in the client's shoes, it's going to completely throw you off. And then other things, it's like research skills, which Anna spoke to earlier, about being able to analyze data as well, and also having a user-centered mindset. So it's about putting the person first, not your tastes, not your preferences, but you're bringing in that technical skill that will enable you to interpret the person's brief in the best way possible.
Amazing. And I'm taking some notes to summarize it at the end for the audience benefit, even though we will send obviously around the recording. I think what you've all mentioned there is going to assist many, many people consider how to position themselves for a transition and to consider those items, especially the transferable skills, which come from all sorts of backgrounds and experiences. How to build a portfolio and network within the UX community, I'd like to touch on next. Anna and Simon, you've both been involved in developing the UX Design Career Accelerator to a certain degree, which is extremely practical in its nature. It brings the best of academic rigor, but also is designed with industry expertise, ensuring relevance. So there's no exams in the program. Learners are instead empowered to develop their digital portfolio and work with employers like Creative Navy. What do employers look for when hiring UXers? And how important is a portfolio of real-world experience?
I'd say a portfolio is very important. I'd say some people will argue it's not necessary. I think it's not necessary when you've got quite a lot of experience under your belt, maybe, and you've got that name. But when you're starting out, you can. I think a portfolio, you treat it like you would any kind of project that you were approaching, I think, as a user experience designer. So, you've got to think of the people who are using it, the recruiters. What are they looking for? Initially, they're going to be scanning through hundreds of them. So find those key things that will get their attention, be visual, don't overwhelm them, and just find that hook that people are looking for. But the key thing, I think, looking through a portfolio is thinking about how you would then talk to that portfolio, how you would show the thing that makes you and how you would show, touching on Maiyo's point, design thinking, the thinking, not, it should be as clean and as clear as it can be as a UX designer, but it doesn't have to be perfect. But you have to be able to show that you can think about a problem and you can explore it. So whether that's even just, if you don't have a lot of examples, show photos of yourself interviewing someone. Show you drawing on a whiteboard, and it can be mucky, it can be messy, but just show as much as you can in a clear way, so someone can tell that story. Like, what is your story? And then you don't have to have loads of final products if you don't have them yet. Just sort of show that you're a thinker. Find ways to show that you will talk to people, you're a thinker, and you're interested in making it as clear and clean as possible. I think those are kind of my key top tips. When I started out, obviously I didn't have a portfolio of, I had some examples of work I'd previously done, which I sort of shimmied in there in a way that made it look like I had professional experience in UX, but it was just professional experience. But also I had a lot of examples of just the process, and lots of photos of me doing stuff. So it looked like I was very active, which I was, to try and show that this was my experience, that I wanted to find answers. I was trying to solve problems actively.
Excellent. Excellent.
I think we probably need to get something out there straight away and say portfolios are one of the hardest things to create. Well, from my point of view, it's incredibly hard. And whenever someone says, "Oh, can we see your portfolio?" I almost die inside. I go, "Oh no, do I really have to show a portfolio?" So we're all in it together. We all know how painful it is to create them, but we kind of know how important they are as well. And from my perspective, they don't need to be a well-designed masterpiece. So they don't need to be hanging in the Tate Modern as like a masterpiece of portfolio creation. They just need to tell that story, as Anna was saying. So things like, what was the timeline for you to create this work? How did you contribute to the work? And what was the collaborative efforts that you kind of put into it? So who were you working with, and what were their roles on the team, and so on. And regardless of whether you're the most junior designer or the most senior designer, it's like, what leadership skills have you kind of employed in that project that you worked on? So you can have leadership as your first day on the job, as much as you can have leadership on your 1000th day on the job. So kind of understanding and seeing that, and that almost demonstrates this growth mindset that we've been talking about. And then really discussing around the things that have challenged you and what you've learned from those challenges, because that you take those forward into the next thing. So almost showing a timeline of progression. If you're just a user researcher, well, sorry, I shouldn't say just a user researcher. If you're a user researcher, then you want to show progression, that you've learned something, you did something here and you learned it, you did something here, you didn't make the same decisions or mistakes or whatever the next time, and you moved forward, and you show that progression throughout your portfolio.
Wonderful. Thank you both. Practically, I guess then, how can career changes best showcase some relevant work experience or transferable skills in a portfolio when considering switching into UX?
So the wonderful thing about the program that we offer at 4th Rev is that we actually run workshops. We're going to begin running workshops to help learners put a portfolio together, because we do understand it's a central part in helping you land a role. And some key things to consider, speaking to what Anna was saying about show them. I loved it when you said that, because that's what, in a coaching context, we encourage learners to do, show them. And we primarily do that through the personal branding that I was talking about, because when we think about a personal brand, we tend to think of it as a celebrity. We'll think, oh, Beyonce is a personal brand, or we'll think Richard Branson is a brand. But each and every one of us is a personal brand, whether we know it or not, whether we like it or not. So we're really intentional about helping you craft a narrative around whatever it is that you want to be known for in the UX space. So let's say, for instance, you want to focus on green, eco-friendly organizations. That's the kind of work that you want to do. Within your personal brand, how do you communicate that? When you're talking about your personal brand statement, how have you fused that into that? And then how are you bringing the colors, the elements, the browns, the greens into your portfolio subtly, so that it's consistently communicating that? And it's also about positioning your brand personality. One thing we're passionate about is helping and empowering people to feel at home within themselves. So enabling your brand personality to come out in your portfolio is important. So are you a loud, outgoing person? Are you more quiet, more of an introvert? How is your portfolio being used to communicate that? And it's also about tailoring your portfolio to your audience. So what is it that your audience ideally wants to know about you? So if, for instance, you're into the eco-green space, etc., what kinds of projects have you done around that? What kind of work can you showcase specifically to that? And the most important thing is to create a compelling narrative, tell a story about yourself in the portfolio, and ensure that there's consistency in all platforms, wherever you talk about yourself. So if you have a LinkedIn portfolio, make sure you're talking eco-friendly, sustainability, et cetera, so that it's aligned with whatever it is in your portfolio. So don't be different personalities, different brands in different spaces, especially when you're actively pursuing a role and people are Googling you. So very important to be consistent. And the wonderful thing is that on the program, you actually develop your portfolio. You do real life projects, you do real life scenario planning where you get assignments. So you're building up your portfolio as you're on the program. So you're not suddenly dropped into the marketplace and now you have to figure all of this stuff out. We really hold your hand all the way through the program so that by the time you finish, we increase the likelihood of you landing that job.
I'm going to host a longer session post for those that are interested. There's a few questions coming through about that, and I will dive deeper into the value of that portfolio development throughout the program, but also the employer-facing project. Just a reminder for everyone, we do want to get to the audience questions. Use the Q&A function for your questions, and feel free to read through some and upvote them as to which ones you'd like us to answer first as well. Before I move on to the next section, networking is always an important part of any job search or professional development or even a change of careers. Does anyone have any strategies or tips for networking within the UX community, both online and offline?
Well, I think if you're living in a big city, it's probably quite easy for you to network. So I live very close to London, and when I was starting out in my career, I was actually living in London, and they had lots of things like the User Experience Professionals Association that you could go along to events that they held every month. And there are other conferences like UX London and so forth. And more recently, there's Product Tank. So there's quite a lot that you can actually do in your local area, and most big cities tend to have these events now. And I always encourage people to go along to them, because that's where you start picking up and meeting like-minded people. And there's obviously going to be other events that maybe happen on an evening somewhere else, and you can just go out and slowly build your network that way. And that's certainly how I did it in the early days. Obviously, with social media as well, it's quite easy to reach out to people that are anywhere in the world and have that conversation with them, and maybe even arrange phone calls and things. But meeting people face to face has been hugely beneficial to my career.
Yeah, I mean, I'd agree. I think starting out, I did a lot of face-to-face meeting, but I think now things have changed a lot. Obviously, post-pandemic, we're in a very much more online world. Some things happen only online. And there's a lot to be said from from that personal branding is also sort of marketing yourself online and networking online. So creating Medium posts, being active on LinkedIn, sharing your opinion, following the right people on LinkedIn. And there are lots of them. They're great. And yet contributing to conversations, getting your name out there. And the other thing I always say with UX is UX never happens in silo, is always adjacent to other careers. And lots of people that you might have known in your past may have changed careers as well. One of my early freelance roles was through someone who was a flatmate of mine who had joined a company, and then they saw me on LinkedIn and saw I was in UX, so we randomly connected. But because I was somewhat active on LinkedIn and could have been more active, they connected through that. So I would say make use of connections you already have, because you've probably got lots of them, and use them online and share your knowledge and have conversations, because that's just as useful a way of networking, I think, these days, as well as being sort of in person, and it helps to just bolster that personal brand at the same time.
And just to add to that, in terms of networking, so zeroing in on LinkedIn specifically, there's this wonderful thing called LinkedIn events, where you can go and search their UX events that are happening online, and it's a great space for you to to find that community of people that you can then connect with in real time while you're on the call and you're looking at the people's names, you can connect with them. So it saves you the trouble of then having to go out and research where these people are on LinkedIn. And another great way to network, again, within LinkedIn, is to think of the kinds of organizations you want to work in, and whether you know them by name or you're just interested in a specific industry, search for people within those specific spaces so that you can be exposed to what's happening within the organization. Because sometimes we have dreams of working somewhere, but then when we engage with somebody on LinkedIn who's through their posts, the content that they're sharing, we actually realize that, wait a minute, that's actually not a space that I'm interested in going in. I want to do something more exciting or something calmer or whatever it is. So really targeting how you maneuver, how you connect, like, comment, etc. All those things within LinkedIn, they make a huge difference in networking.
That's a good point, and that aligns with one's values as to where they may choose to apply and work for in the future. That, again, I'll touch on it, Maiyo, in a moment or later on, about the coaching aspect of the program and aligning values with employment outcomes, especially. We're going to move on to the last questions that I have, because there's so many questions and we want to reserve plenty of time for the audience questions as well. So any advice on continuous learning and career growth within the field? Anna and Simon first, can you provide any examples of how continuous learning or upskilling has personally benefited your career?
Well, I could probably jump in straight away and talk about King's rival. So actually getting into UX, I obviously did the HCI course. So that was a real accelerator to actually moving across to UX. But once I was there was always kind of little events around. And when I first kind of was doing UX, I went to content design events as much as I went to user research events and went to kind of more general UX events. So really kind of trying to identify gaps in your knowledge and seeking out how you can fill those gaps is really beneficial. So whether it's understanding a bit more around psychology or user research and different things like that, there are plenty of events, there are plenty of courses, and things like Skillshare are brilliant for that, aren't they? Where you can just go on, subscribe, and then you found someone talking about a certain thing, or even just going to YouTube and doing it there. So I think that it's part of a UX designer's mindset to actually think, right, well, what gap do I have in my knowledge, and how can I build on those gaps, and then therefore how can I bring that into my daily practice and demonstrate that I've learned that and improved.
That goes for those that are looking to advance careers, not just change that gap identification as well. Anna, briefly, and Maiyo, I've got one more question for you before we get to the audience.
I think, what Simon said, there's loads of resources online, but I think one of the greatest ways of learning is learning from your peers, working in if you can find a place to work which fosters that kind of learning. And when you're applying for roles, you ask that question of about career development within the team. The most I've ever learned, I think I can learn things online, is from my peers and seeing how they do things. And also, actually, one of the greatest ways I've learned is by teaching as well. I think, teaching something helps you just solidify in your mind, and you learn new ways, and you get questions, and you think, actually, maybe there is a better way of doing it. So that's something that I try and kind of do now a little bit more of, is learn from my peers, but also teach my peers if there's something I'm quite good at. It makes me even better if I can sort of teach it and become an expert in it. And you kind of have to be an expert in it if you want to try and teach it. So I think that's the summary.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and actually,
sorry,
so in terms of that, like the UX accelerator, actually thinking about how we built that course really starts you thinking about, okay, well, what do people want to learn? So to what Anna was saying, is like teaching people, right? Where we weren't actually teaching people directly at that point, but learning how to build a course that ends up teaching people about this thing really starts think your synapses going and thinking, okay, I need to learn about this to be able to actually more confidently talk about it, or more confidently teach someone else.
which is very valued by all in the program. It makes it so unique having that industry perspective, first and foremost, with the academic underpinnings of King's. And part of the program is coaching, career coaching. Maiyo, during the program, learners get actually 6 one-on-one sessions with yourself or someone else or one of the other esteemed career coaches from Port Rev. Can you explain how you work with a learner to ensure they're on the right path to achieving their personal career goals?
First up, it begins with reflection. We want to know our learners. We want to understand their bigger context, their values, their interests, etc. And once we have an idea on that, then we move on to goal setting. So goal setting really is about being very specific about what it is that the learner wants to get out of the program. So for some people, it's to get a job. For others, it's to increase their skills, etc. So whatever that is, we make sure it's clear and it has a time frame to it, and we do our best to help them achieve that. And then it's also about setting milestones, because it's important for us to track their progress as we go along. We don't just set the goals and then wait for 6 months to go by and say, oh, have you achieved your goal? We set specific milestones on a monthly basis, weekly basis, depending on the needs of the learner, so that we can stay on track. And speaking of staying on track, we have a document that we use called a career tracker. So this is something that both the career coach and the learner have access to, that we continuously update together with thoughts, insights, etc., so that we ensure that we're on the same page as far as possible. And finally, something that is unique to our coaching journey is that we have coaches from all over the world. And this really gives us rich, diverse perspectives when it comes to coaching. So it doesn't matter where you're joining the course from, wherever you are in the world, we pool our skills and our resources and we learn from each other, because we do a lot of peer learning as well. Because the way I coach, for instance, might be completely different to the way somebody coaches in London, and vice versa, right? So to ensure that we tap into the insights and the learnings and experiences of all of us, we make sure that we have a pool of knowledge. And one of those pools is a learning portal that we have called Own Your Career. So it's a self-learning portal where learners can go in, search on a subject, and then they'll get videos, they'll get information on how to work on that specific thing.
Wonderful. Thank you all. That's been absolutely sensational. And there's some great tips, advice, and strategies built in with your responses. We're going to get to the audience questions now. And I'll ask that we be short and sharp to get through as many as we can. The one that is on everyone's mind is, and this is from an anonymous attendee, how do you see AI influencing both UX and service design? Is this a career that is future-proof as AI starts to be able to automate certain tasks?
Good question. Yeah, it's a really good question. I think AI can help us in design. It can help, to be honest, help some of the process that can be a bit, that attention to detail, some of those things. It can help us not have to dot as many I's and cross as many T's. But in terms of design thinking, in terms of solving problems, I don't think it's there yet. And so I don't think it's a career that's going to be challenged by that. In terms of actually using the tools, the actual physical designing, putting everything together, it will help us, I think, in there. And I think that's why it's really important to, I guess, learn more about the kind of the soft skills, the thinking, the presenting, the collaborating, because that is not something that AI can do. That's a very human skill. Very
true. I think it is certainly enhancing efficiency, enhancing many aspects of the role, but I think it's so human-centered in terms of output and considerations as well. I think they're certainly going to complement, but certainly not overtake. Just a reminder before we move to the next question as well, everyone can download the brochure, and there's some brilliant questions in the chat that I'm going to address following, especially around the program, but also finding a specific job and things like that. And there's some brilliant questions that I think would be best answered by booking a time with an enrolment advisor, and that link is in the chat as well. Getting on to the next one. very quickly, I've heard the job title product designer used for UI and UX designers. Is that title actually interchangeable, or is it a different career entirely?
I get very confused by titles. And I'll draw an example here. So at the moment, I'm doing service design, but at the same time, I do interaction design, and it really depends on the need and what we're trying to achieve at a certain point in time. Prior to working for a government department, I was known as a UX designer, and prior to that, probably something else. So for me, most job titles are interchangeable. Most job titles can just be distilled down to design or user-centered design, maybe. And it's really how you tell that story to people and what you want to do, I guess, in terms of whether there's a specific element of the design title that you want to chase after. And different companies will call their designers different things. In the past, you may have had information architect, but what's that now? It's like, is that interaction designer? Is that service designer? Is that UX designer? So lots of different titles, and they're mostly interchangeable, I would think.
Fantastic. Getting through some more as well. Maiyo, could you provide tips for people, and this is from Engel, could you provide tips for people looking to enter the UX field without relevant experience? The examples we've shared so far seem to have included relevant experience, interior design, web development, and content design. I know we've got such a myriad of students studying without experience. Are there any tips that you could provide someone without any seemingly relevant experience, I guess, is the opt?
Okay, so with the seemingly transferable skills, it seems that way because I explained it that way, right? So whatever job you give me, I'll be able to show you, I'll be able to relate that. So let's say, for instance, you're a doctor and you want to go into UX design. Now that seemingly looks like it's worlds apart, right? But coming back to my example of empathy, of communication skills, of being able to connect with a diverse range of people, communicate your ideas, your thinking, etc. All of those things are done by a doctor. So in that context, because I've explained it, they're transferable. So if you like, you can post the job or the experience that you have. And then if we have time at the end, I can then quickly demonstrate to you how there's transferable skills within that. So it's about challenging yourself and looking for that golden thread in everything that you've done.
Monica has a question from the audience as well, having a hospitality background, which is very dear to my heart. And when you, be it in the service side, front of house, or be it in back of house, you're thinking about the customer experience in that dining experience that you're providing, or that function, or whatever it may be. Whilst it's not in always a digital context, it is in many cases when you're a part of the organisation that is showcasing. So Monica, I'd love you to stick around to learn more about the program, because I think you do have, and many others do have, those transferable skills you may not even be aware of as well. Rani has asked, I'm interested more so in UX research than design. Can UX research be a standalone career path from design, or is it preferable to be able to do both? Great question for Simon or Anna.
Yeah, I don't mind answering. I'm happy. Yeah, absolutely. I have in both, the companies I've worked for, we had user researchers, and they're user researchers. They don't do the design element. And I know I'm having people on the course right now, and their plan is to go into user research. They're aware of the design. They have to be kind of aware of how it all works together. But it's absolutely 100% a standalone career, and more, like you'll see jobs advertised all the time for user researcher. And I think, yeah, you have to kind of show a passion for it, and maybe it's a different kind of portfolio if you want to start off in that way. But yeah, I think you can definitely go in that direction.
And in a government setting, they have very distinct roles. So you would have a service designer, an interaction designer, content designer. You'd also have a user researcher and product manager and so on. So they consider the roles very different. Whereas in the private sector that I've worked in, I've done both design and research together and grown teams and just brought in user researchers to really focus on the research element and not necessarily design. But really part of it is, certainly in my role at the moment, I work very closely with a researcher, and whilst they aren't doing the design, they kind of contribute very, very much to the design.
I love that, boring into that even deeper, and the different context between government and corporate and startup and large organisations. It's so varied. I just want to address Toby. Actually, Toby's put a question specific to the program. Toby, there are 3 ways to enter the program, so I'll touch on that after. It's not necessarily that you only can enter with a degree. It is aimed at postgraduate, but there are other ways that I will explain entry into the program as well. Just checking on time. So Harry has asked here, with a career in UX being somewhat easy, I guess, to get into with no real qualifications necessary, do you have any tips on how they could make their portfolio stand out to employers? Harry, I think we've touched on this already, in the sense that it be genuine, but also be your brand. And I'll summarize that a little more as well. And certainly a part of the course is to develop your portfolio as you go. But that's going to be along the lines of thinking of the audience, how to talk to it if you do get the opportunity. How do you talk to your portfolio? Being consistent and demonstrating transferable skills, I think, is an excellent way to stand out in a portfolio. Now, there's some people that have upvoted this one, so I do want to address it. Someone's recently completed a UX boot camp at finding it very hard to get an entry-level job. I'll ask that you stay around, because even Maiyo might be able to assist there. That there's big differences in the rigor behind this program, the industry engagement with this program, and the career coaching as well. Couple more before we wrap up. There's been so many questions, and it's so good to see so many people still here. It's a massive audience, so thank you all. Just a quick one here. Another bootcamp question. This is a theme. So there's Patricia and Guido, I think it is. I'm going to read out Patricia's question, but it's relevant for a few that are looking between that entry level and senior role, how to transition. So Patricia, after returning work from being a stay-at-home mum, we love empowering women, but also helping return to work mums, and there's so many success stories around that. Ended off in 29 as a usability manager for a large software development company, and can't afford to return in a junior role as she's the primary breadwinner. And it's also someone else that is transitioning after 15 years long of web and graphic design. They can't transfer into a entry-level role, yet they won't be able to apply for the absolute senior roles. What are and I guess for yourself first, what are the tips on being able to transition into that midpoint, or that role that will enable them to not only transition, but to provide for families in the case of Patricia?
So first off, there's no one-size-fits-all approach to our career paths and our career development. And we have had learners on all of our programs where some of them wanted to start at entry-level positions. Some of them wanted to go in a bit higher because of their financial commitments. So to answer your question, it really depends on your networking, your ability to position yourself in the marketplace, how you perform in interviews, etc. So if you've set your eyes on a particular level and a particular income, don't be afraid to ask for that. Because what we often find is that learners are too terrified to even begin the conversation, because they think, I just qualified, I don't deserve to have this, etc., etc. But those that do push through and do internalize the career coaching, they're able to get the roles that they ideally wanted to get. And it doesn't mean you'll get smack bang exactly. Sometimes you might get a little bit less. Sometimes you might even get a little bit more. So I encourage you to just look at it with an open mind and not close any doors on yourself because you think that I don't have enough experience, therefore I cannot be asking for X amount. And in one instance, we had a learner who got a role in a startup organization. And the interesting thing that is, she was the only person who could perform her function. So she was the boss of the department and she had carte blanche to design whatever department she wanted to create. And she went into that role with zero experience, but she managed to get the salary that she wants and to be at a level that she wants.
And I'm just going to add, just to speak to the stay-at-home mum who took a break, UX is an empathetic career, and it is a wonderful career to get back into after being a stay-at-home mum. And I took 2 years out, and I had to come back into it after having a kid. So I completely understand. And I didn't want to go back full-time, and I didn't go back full-time. I started off part-time. I asked for the money that I required to do my job. And you know what? Not everyone gave me those jobs. And those companies were not the ones I wanted to work for, but I was very transparent. And it did take a little bit longer, but there are companies out there, government organizations, I think, and charities are particularly amongst the ones that are extremely supportive towards families and women returning to career. So I am, and other corporate organizations as well. So champion it, be a part of the change, and people will respect you for that. So go for it.
Wonderful. I'm going to download a number of questions. There will be an opportunity to ask questions in a follow-up email that we'll send around. So to wrap things up very, very briefly, we touched on the key skills for transition, the transferable skills. So many of the soft skills that are required can be learned. The attitude, empathy, communication skills, and attention to detail as well. When we touched on the portfolio, we did discuss thinking of the audience that you're pitching to and how to talk to it if you do get that opportunity to be consistent, to demonstrate those transferable skills that have been mentioned so many times. We discussed networking at length. The different, you mentioned the UX Professionals Association, LinkedIn, zeroing in on LinkedIn events was a key outcome there as well. Identifying the gaps through continuous learning. And then we've gone on to, obviously, the audience questions, which have just been absolutely sensational. So I'm going to stay around, but what I'd like to do for the remaining 2 minutes is ask Anna and Simon, before I say thank you, is there anything else that you could, in a minute or so each, provide the audience that we haven't covered that you feel would be of value? I'll flip a coin as to who may go first, or do you feel, if you feel we've covered everything, I'm delighted with that as an outcome as well. Simon.
That's like the killer exam question, isn't it? It's like Anna and I just sitting there like,
it's because we're too nice and no one wants to take the last one.
No, after you, Anna, it's fine.
No, you go. I just spoke.
I just kind of wish everyone good luck and just take that kind of positive mindset that people are there to help you. They're not there to hinder you. So if you want to get into this career, it's possible to get into it and do the things that you love and enjoy. You don't have to be afraid that someone is going to say, shut the door in your face and go away. And if they do, then they're not worthwhile. You can move on to the next thing. And there's so much out there that so much opportunity that you're able to get where you need to go to.
So much demand as well. Anna.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, reach out to people, a lot of this career is feedback. So start now, open yourself up to feedback, get feedback on your portfolio, get feedback on your LinkedIn, and just be open to, welcome, friendly critique, because it's going to help you and it will connect you with people. And if people see you're open to feedback and critique as well, then that's a very positive for them, maybe opening the door in a different scenario. So, yeah.
At time, anything you wanted to add, or shall I say thank you to everyone?
Wanted to add resilience, courage, determination. To make a career switch will require a lot out of you, and be willing to walk that journey, be willing to go through the fear, the criticism, like Anna said, but eventually, on the other side, once you've gone through that feedback, the critique, etc., you will emerge where you want to be. And get out of your own way, basically. Put away your excuses, your negative thinking, the self-talk, etc., that keeps you held back. And again, this is something that career coaches help you navigate through. So it's about being resilient and charging forward.
Fantastic. And it has been my absolute pleasure. Just two last reminders. I am going to stick around to discuss the program, the entry requirements and things like that, because there's so many questions have come up regarding that. But as you've all registered and attended today, in your inbox tomorrow, along with the recording of this session, will be an exclusive bonus on how to cultivate a growth mindset. Along with if you register also by the 17th of October, there's access to another masterclass with a career coach on how to use growth mindset to successfully switch careers, focusing on personal branding, CV development, and overcoming imposter syndrome, which is something else that I think we've touched on without mentioning, but we certainly encounter a great deal. So firstly, thank you to the panel. You've been absolutely sensational. Anna, Simon and Maiyo, thank you ever so kindly. It's been my pleasure to host this. I think the audience has got a great deal of it. I've learned from you as well, and your time and input is very, very much appreciated.
Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
My absolute pleasure. And for the audience, thank you. There's been so many of you in attendance and so much engagement. It's part of our value offering that we would love to, that we do plan on doing a lot more. And there's also recordings of previous ones that we've done on our YouTube page as well that you can look up. We will be hosting more in the future, and we'll be showcasing actual outcomes from students upcoming shortly as well. Lastly, I'm going to stick around. I'd like to say thank you one last time for all of those. Anyone that does want to stay around, I'm going to I'm going to dedicate the next half an hour if you would like to learn more about the program and offer something as well in that. Anna, Simon, Maiyo, thank you ever so kindly for your time today.
Thanks, everyone.